In special collections, we digitise quite a big variety of materials from the archives. So books and pages from books, loose prints, etchings, engravings, framed items, artwork of all sorts, things on vellum and parchment. So there's a lot of deeds, 18th century deeds are on vellum, lantern slides, magic lantern slides, photographic prints, 35mm colour transparency slides, which are positive. They're the right way around, so that they're not like negatives, which everything's the wrong way around. Which we can do black and white negatives as well. Objects as well, busts, scientific equipment. We've got a sports cap. We do a lot of letter books. So Brunel or Pinney, their clerk, would write out every outgoing letter. So there'd be pages after pages of all the outgoing correspondence. The process of digitisation, the first thing is to find the item in the archive. So I might be given the archive reference number or a shelf number or something. So I find it in the archive, bring it up to the digitisation room. I've got 2 copy stands in the room, a small one and a big one, which is ideal for copying very large things. The lights can be moved, which makes it possible to adjust depending on what you're trying to do. So the first thing is to put the camera on the copy stand and make sure that it is absolutely level. If it's not level and not in parallel with the baseboard, you get rather unpleasant distortions and strange shapes, so you don't want that. So you get it level, put the memory card in. You can take pictures with the camera tethered to a laptop, but we don't have that set up like that at the moment. Then you arrange the item under the camera with the copy stand lights on, and when you're happy that you've got it framed nicely with a little bit of background around it, so you're not cutting in too tight, you check the exposure and you check the focus and take your picture. So that's most flat things would be copied like that. If you're doing anything transparent, so black and white negatives, lantern slides, 35mm slides, you put a light box under the copy stand, put the item to be copied on that, and again fill the frame pretty much. With black and white negatives and lantern slides, you might want to sort of try around with different exposures till you're happy with the exposure. With black and white negatives, you can invert them in Photoshop, which makes it into a positive, like a print, like a photographic print. Doesn't work with color negatives though. You just get another set of peculiar colors, so it's no good, but it works with slides very well, the light box. And then I suppose the third method is things which are more three-dimensional, i.e. objects, or if you want to show something as an object, you wouldn't use the copy stand, you'd set up some background paper and the lights and photograph it as if it's in a little studio. I don't usually wear gloves for several reasons. One's hands are more, you can be more dexterous, get a better grip on things, and it turned pages easier and quicker without tearing them, and without, if you wear gloves, sometimes the cotton can catch on something. And so it's a general dexterous thing, but handling skills includes knowing where on a negative, for example, you never touch the emulsion side. In fact, it's best not to touch any side of a negative except the very, very edges. And same with photographic prints, you don't really want to be fingering them a lot. Fingernails cause a lot of damage to books, especially the old leather books. If it slips whilst you're picking it up, you can damage the binding with your fingernails. So short fingernails, clean hands, and that includes actually things like moisturizer, hand sanitizer. It should all be washed off and just have clean hands. Problems encountered digitizing. Just about everything comes with a problem, if you like, and it has to be, the digitization has to be worked out with that in mind. So, for example, manuscripts written in ink, 200 years old, you might have the ink is a kind of acid and it's burnt through the paper, or it's sort of spread. That's a kind of etching effect, acid attack effect. You might have a show through, where the print or the ink on the one side of the paper is showing through on the other, and there's ways you can minimize that look and make it the document more readable and usable. In the digitization, you put either a black or a white card underneath. You might have tightly bound books, and very difficult to get the words that are going into the gutter. One way you deal with that with the camera and copy stand method is you just have a pretty good depth of focus. So even though it's going off on a slight curve and going further away from the camera, it's still in focus and it's still readable if you can adjust it properly under the camera. You might have items that are glass already or glazed things, or very shiny albumen prints from the 19th century, photographic prints. They used albumen, which comes from egg white, and it makes for a very reflective surface. So any reflective surfaces you need to deal with one way or another. Quite often have to avoid the reflection of the actual stand that the camera is mounted to. Other problems might be, items might be very big. Very small is the smallest thing I've had to photograph is about a postage stamp, and that's not a problem, just have the right lens. But large items you can do on the big copy stand beside me here. You can probably do something up to about A2, thereabouts, paper size. If the item's bigger than that, which does happen, you need to put out some supports to hold it up on the copy stand flat, and then you can take a photograph in either 2 or 3 or 4 shots and then photo merge them in Photoshop, join it back together again. It's not perfect doing it that. Sometimes the photo merging doesn't work exactly and you might get a line that just suddenly breaks. But the alternative is well, taking it outside usually and trying to take the whole thing in one go with one shot with natural light. If something's rolled up, often it's very happy being rolled up and it doesn't really like being unrolled, and it wants to roll up again. You have to be extremely careful you don't tear, especially if it's any kind of paper or old paper. It's very fragile. With things that are rolled, it's the easiest thing to tear something. So again, just incredibly carefully and slowly unrolling it. You can put weights, you can use snakes with lead weights wrapped in fabric. Or we've got other kinds of weights. I sometimes use metal rulers and small weights. And you can either use the weights and things to keep it flat in a way that it's not going to be part of the final image. You can crop off the weights, or you can put the weights on if it's a bit of white paper or something that's not got any detail, it's just a plain colour, and then in Photoshop you can actually just clean off the where the weight is. We're copying the colour on, pasting it onto that bit, or you can just say, okay, this item, say a vellum deed that you have to unfold, there is absolutely no way you can have that flat and no objects holding it flat. And then you just say, okay, this is for reading. It's not going to be a beautiful photograph of it, but it can be read and used, and you just say, okay, we'll include the weights in the picture. One other type of digitization we do is for preservation purposes. There were some very lovely photographs taken inside Clifton Hill House about 1915 or so. They were half-plate glass negatives. At some point they hadn't been stored very well, probably, and the emulsion had come off the glass. So the emulsion is where the photographic image is and had cracked and flaked. So we wanted to have a record of this negative before it deteriorated even more. Digitizing photographs is a very successful form of copying, really. Sometimes the prints are very curly or not flat. So with those, one usually puts a piece of glass on top, or you could use rulers to just hold down the edges with weights, but a bit of glass is fine. Of course, if you use glass, you've created a reflective surface, so you have to use something higher up so you're not going to get a reflection of the camera and the mount. How are our images used? Well, one of the main purposes is for the online archive catalogue, and these images are low-res JPEGs, but they are large enough images so that you can actually read what's written on them. So they're not just, this is a picture of a page, which is not much use to most people. You can, on the online archive catalogue, you can actually open the image and read what it says on it, on that page. So that's one main use. Then you'd have readers' requests. So readers and academics might want pictures for their research, for their books. So we do quite a lot of that. As a sort of subset of requests would be other parts of the university wanting images for various uses. For example, to decorate the corridors and offices in the School of Humanities or the libraries. So there's various large images around the Arts and Social Sciences Library, for example. They're also used in exhibitions. Special Collections was involved with an exhibition in Australia. We've got some very lovely ambrotypes which went to that, but only the and the digital images of it for their catalogue and so on. Other uses, other projects around the university, for example, the 100 years of postgraduate teaching, we've been supplying images for them for their use on Twitter and their own web pages. And also special collections, of course, tweets and the library tweets as well. So they're used for that too, and on our blogs, and for teaching as well. And that's something that's come to the fore in recent months as well. Academics wanting digital images for their online delivery of their courses. So after the photography side, the copying side, the memory cards, take it out of the camera, put it into a card reader, and in Photoshop transfer all the images onto my desktop and then start working on them. So I'd make digital negatives and so-called and TIFF image files, the two standard formats, DNG, .dng and .tiff. The DNGs I don't do anything to except give them a label. The TIFFs I modify and optimize, crop them nicely, make sure the brightness and contrast is correct, the colors are correct, and then I'd label them with some meaningful label, and then make low-res JPEGs from the TIFF. Again, it would have the same reference number, and then they all get put onto the university server, and I would also keep a record of what it is, so that anyone can find the images. It's not a full catalogue record, it's just a quick guide to finding those images. It's very difficult to choose a favourite image, actually. I think I could choose a favourite type, which is, I think, negatives. I really like digitising negatives because it's a bit magical. It's a bit like being in a photographic darkroom when you invert and you can see the image properly. And then you can compare the negative with a print made, perhaps the print was made 100 years ago, and the difference is astonishing. There's so much more detail in the negative. The print typically will have faded and may have got damaged. Yeah, I really like negatives. And I suppose a favourite project, I particularly enjoyed being part of the Penguin Parade exhibition at the Royal West of England Academy a few years ago, and we basically showcased the really fantastic penguin archive here, and it was a very well curated and very well put together exhibition. Did an awful lot of digitisation for that.